JB, week 9 in the books. That means we have just 2 weeks left here in this regular season. Flown by, hasn't it?
It really has. I can't believe it's almost November.
Well, I can believe it's almost November for the simple reason I was out in the elements for a lot of the day yesterday, and it was not one of my favorite days in the world. I reffed after I came back from the game against Salisbury that Rowan hosted, and let me tell you, my shower is full of wet clothes, wet bean bags, wet everything from my reffing experience yesterday. Yeah, New York City was not a pleasant place. It subsided a little bit in Rowan. What did not subside was Salisbury's yardage and score and a lot more. We're going to talk about that throughout this broadcast. But a lot of single-digit scores I noticed as I was going through different slides that we're going to be putting up here by the losing teams especially. Yeah, a lot of passing. The Brockport game is something we need to really look at and talk about a little bit here because we've been getting a lot of questions about that. The new MAC is a real shuffle going on right now in Pool B in general.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot to talk about there. So give me your quick 30,000-foot overview here, and then we're going to jump into what we normally do at this point.
Yeah, I think the further northeast you got, I think the worse the weather affected things. I watched some games in New England. There was actually snow up in Maine for the Bates game. So definitely, I think that with the wind and weather kind of going across upstate New York and then down through sort of northern New Jersey, I watched a couple of games in Pennsylvania. It didn't seem like the weather was that bad down there. You said, things in Jersey were okay, not great, but certainly not as bad as they could be. So I think definitely hurt the passing game. We saw some pretty large rushing numbers rather. So I think teams had to adapt, and they found ways to win. And we're getting into Week 10, which we've always circled on the calendar as the big D3 Blitzer weekend, where lots of conference championships are up for grabs and playoff bids are up for grabs, and we'll see how the playoff picture starts to shake out.
Playoffs? What are you talking about? Playoffs?
Rankings, regional rankings coming up on Wednesday.
We going live for that? I think we might have to after they get released, and we'll walk folks through what it all means. So circle that on your calendar. About half an hour after regional rankings come out, we will go through them for the East Region regional rankings. Easy for me to say. You know what's easier for me to say? Let's go and do our Crunchtime segment for the games of October 26th and 27th, 2018, Week 9. And in Crunch Time this week, we're going to start in the CCC. Who knew? We do it every week this way, it seems like. And there's good reason to hear as Western New England, who really came out slow and sluggish against Nichols, ends up winning the game going away 49-14. They were tied at halftime, 14 apiece. And Alec Coleman, 306 total yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 on the ground. Consider that one for a second. And also Peter Hoff, 19 rushes, 123 yards, and 1 touchdown. You watch this game. Kudos to Nichols with great video. Is one thing we want to say. But beyond that, they held them. What happened?
I think it was just one of those things. The first half, it was a monsoon, and then the Western New England sort of figured out how to deal with the weather, and that was basically to let Alec Coleman run the ball. So that's what they did. And they started piling up points. The defense held, and Nichols really wasn't able to keep up with the Golden Bears.
Obviously, they will face Endicott in Western New England next week. More on that game in a little bit with the implications of it. Curry, 22. Becker, 6. Becker just can't get off the schneid this season, as it is Zach Levy with 40 rushes, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Curry. The defense of Curry held Becker to 100 yards and had 2 interceptions. And Nick Chevalier with 2 for 8 for 0 yards. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's actually some negative receptions that brought the total to 0. It's like we said, with the wind and bad weather up in New England, a lot of damage to the passing game over the weekend.
Let's finish out Salve Regina 33, University of New England 10, as it was Joey Moriello and Ronnie Martin rushing for a combined 321 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game. Moving right along to the ECFC. Gallaudet, as you're going to see here, had the game-winning touchdown in the third quarter. But let's give kudos here to some individual players. It's R.J. Randall, 26 rushes, 123 yards, 1 touchdown. Alfred State, though, had a good player in Carter Harmon, their quarterback, 10 for 33, 161, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. This allows the game against Husson to have meaning next week as Gallaudet takes on Husson. We'll again detail that a little bit more later. SUNY Maritime 14, Anna Maria 7. SUNY Maritime just hoping and praying somehow they are able to get into a 3-way tie type of scenario here with Gallaudet's help. Obviously, is going to be necessary. And Joseph Butterworth had 12 for 26, 161, and 1 touchdown. On Anna Maria's side, Ryan Johnson, 7 rushes, 101 yards. Liam Bailey with 11 tackles. Let's just finish out Husson, 48, Castleton 0. Solomon Hassan in that game, 152 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns for him. So JB, Gallaudet, Husson at the top of it, SUNY Maritime hoping. What's your take right now?
Yeah, well, the one thing that really jumped out at me, Frank, was the fact that for the first time in a couple of years, we didn't see Thomas Wright playing quarterback for SUNY Maritime. So it's not clear if this is an injury issue or something else going on, and whether or not he'll be available for the remainder of the season. He's really been the catalyst of that offense. Maybe they end up in a New England Bowl. We might talk about that along with the ACACs now that the bids are starting to come out. But yeah, I mean, I think we've said for a couple of weeks now, Husson and Gallaudet sort of the de facto game. But the way Husson's been performing, I can't imagine that they're going to have any issue there. I do feel like that it's the Eagles are in as the ECFC champs.
We were that sure about the next team we're going to talk about in the Empire 8, Brockport, until this game against Utica. They struggled. It was 2-0 for quite a while in the first half. Then it was 9-0, but Utica scored before halftime. It was 9-6 at halftime. Brockport's defense did a great job. Minus 62 rushing yards allowed. It gets better and better every week for that defense. But Jake O'Connell injured in this game. Tyree Brown injured in this game. O'Connell may be back. Brown we don't know about quite yet. But Benedict did not, I don't think, even travel with the team. So Joe Benedict, their leading rusher, is, I think, banged up. I don't know what's exactly going on here, if it is all injuries or whatnot, but it's 22-6 a victory there, but very reminiscent of that Ithaca game earlier in the season where they couldn't put it away because Brockport had over 500 yards of offense, but only can account for 22 points, including a safety in that number. What are your thoughts there as we approach this Cortland game?
Yeah, I think, maybe this is one of those things where, football seasons are long and guys get hurt and, the next man up isn't always quite ready to go, especially. And this Utica team has been interesting all year, Frank. They've always seemed to play up or down to the level of their competition, so it doesn't surprise me that they would have given them a good game. But maybe the weather and the combination of the injuries sort of had the Golden Eagles a little bit off. But they certainly need to wake up because this Cortland team is definitely looks primed and ready to maybe upset them for the EA title.
We know that Fisher has a decent defense, even though they've struggled this season with only 1 win. Cortland beat them 22-3, and in that game, Johnny Atkins with 37 rushes for 208 yards. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. Atkins against that Brockport defense, and Cameron Bellino, from St. John Fisher with 13 tackles, both teams with 2 interceptions. It is truly a championship game on Saturday. Because Brockport, if they were to lose, Cortland's done in the league. And so they would win the tiebreaker with Cortland. If Cortland loses that game, Brockport wins, nobody could catch Brockport despite what would happen in the Week 11 game. So it is a championship game coming up on Saturday. More on that a little bit later. Morrisville State 38, Buffalo State 14. Third straight win for the Mustangs. And Alfred 41, Hartwick 3, as the Hawks were held to 2 rushing yards. Apparently Alfred doing their best Brockport impression there. Let's move to the Liberty League. Only 2 games to talk about. First off, it was early and often, number 17 RPI over Rochester, 42-0. George Marinopoulos, 16 for 24, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. But this was the first game of the season RPI didn't record an interception. Well, I don't think they really needed one in this game, winning by 42.
No, I don't think so either.
And Ithaca, a team that's still, mathematically alive in the Liberty League, but not by much, playing St. Lawrence. This game has implications insofar as now, if RPI were to beat St. Lawrence next week, RPI wins the league, period. It's over at that point because St. Lawrence needed to win this game against Ithaca to keep things kind of alive in this whole thing. But now it's do or die pretty much, and it's on St. Lawrence's shoulders after a 28-6 loss as Ithaca holds St. Lawrence to 104 yards and 1 for 13 on third down in that game.
Yeah, that was a real mud bowl game, Frank. Even Ithaca only went 4 for 17 on third down, so it was pretty ugly game. But Nabi and company made the plays. Kendall Anderson with a couple touchdowns in that one, so definitely a good win for Ithaca.
Now let's go to the MassCAC. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to jump on you. And the Framingham State game actually got moved to Friday night because they were nervous about those elements, and UMass Dartmouth did not fare well in that game. 44-13, Framingham State wins it to set up things against Western Connecticut next week. Framingham State had 500 yards of total offense, and Karan Wright 17 for 137 yards rushing and 1 TD in that. WestCon goes to 8-0, 33-12 over Fitchburg State. And Kyle McKinnon, thanks for a great interview last week, by the way, and a lot of viewership for that. Your mother was proud of you, that's for darn sure, and we appreciate it.
She sure was.
And Fitchburg State was outgained 357-296. Just overall good play going on for WestCon. With Fitchburg State though having a heck of a run by Garvin in that game. As Sterling Garvin, 26 rushes, 246 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So we want to at least highlight that fact for his team, but basically accounting for all 12 points, it looks like, in that game for his team. Mass Maritime 26, Worcester State 0, as Mass Maritime held Worcester State to 84 yards offensively and 276 yards rushing for Mass Maritime. And Plymouth State 10, Westfield State 7. They've won 3 straight as Plymouth State, and it was Martin with a 26-yard game-winning field goal with 9 seconds left that won that game. The MAC, and my goodness, we just can't shake this potential tiebreaker situation no matter what we try to do with it. Delaware Valley 49, Albright 14. Albright started with scoring, and it didn't really end well for them ultimately. They're 0-8 now. And their next opponent, I believe, is Misericordia, by the way, so this could be a 1-2 punch for them. Deshaun Darden with went 9 for 16, 167 yards, he said, and 2 touchdowns. And Anthony Thomas with a 44-yard interception return for a touchdown in that game.
You'll see a lot more accurate passing numbers in the Pennsylvania box scores. You could definitely tell the weather was not as bad down there. And so a little more balanced attack. Del Val seems to be kind of on cruise control here. I don't suspect that they'll end up getting tripped up other than maybe by Widener, who looked pretty good in a big win over Alvernia.
That'll be in Week 11. Misericordia took on Kings and won 41-23 as it was Brady Williams going 13 for 17, 138, 2 touchdowns, 15 rushes in addition for 77 yards and a touchdown by him. FDU Florham guaranteeing at least a 500 regular season with a 24-23 win over Lebanon Valley, and that was a field goal to end it with 3:20 remaining, and this is the name of names for me, Nick Misajewski, I believe, and I apologize to his family if that's not correct, with a 28-yard field goal there. And let's give some credit to Blackman with 21 rushes, 69 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's Al Nazir Blackman for FU Florham.
Another easy one. Yeah.
Yep. That was easier than the last one, let me just tell you that. Wilkes 14, Lycoming 7, and Wilkes also guaranteeing a 500 or better season at 5-4 right now. Jose Tabora with 18 for 32, 241 passing yards, 75 rushing yards, so more than 300 yards total for him, and 2 passing touchdowns. Finally, Widener 51, Alvernia 0. Widener at the 500 line right now at 4-4 with 3 rushing touchdowns coming from Bauer, that's Johnny Bauer, and Mitchell Verling with 3 passing touchdowns. Held Alvernia to 128 yards on the day. But you pointed it out, Del Val, Widener, Week 11. That's what we're going to really have to look for. But if any team trips up, it'll be interesting. And Stevenson, still mathematically alive, did not play in Week 9. NJAC time. I went to this game. Salisbury 45, Rowan 7. And it was a late score by Rowan to make it that 7. And it's, Jack Navitsky, what a day for him. 15 rushes, 103 yards, 3 touchdowns, all on the ground, obviously. That quarterback who is literally shorter than me, believe it or not. And that doesn't happen much. I'm 5'9", and I think he's about 5'7", but he plays like he's 6'7" in terms of the heart and spirit and attitude he has. Jack Navitsky, we'll have an interview with him coming up next, and Sherman Wood, the head coach of Salisbury. But they moved to 8-0 and really have put an exclamation point on the fact that they're going to be contenders here with Wesley next at Frostburg State in Week 11. 2 big games coming up for them. And let's see, Montclair State 10, Wesley 9, and that Montclair State defense is for real. It's not a fluke that they were able to lose just by 7 points against Frostburg State and 2 points against Salisbury the previous week before that Frostburg game. Wesley had a fumble and a missed field goal in the final fourth quarter drives. They also had a botched extra point. That's what made it 10-9 instead of 10-10. And let's give some credit here to Jaquil Birch from Montclair State. He went 18 for 34, 143 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Obviously gave Wesley opportunities, but the defense of Montclair State, thumbs up to them. Also, let me go back for a second. The defense of Salisbury, we got a little, ribbing on Twitter that we had a lot of Jack Navitsky hour going on there. Salisbury's defense deserves a heck of a pat on the back for their effort. We'll talk more about it later, but to keep Rowan at 7 points and continuously give Salisbury opportunities. Rowan, I think, may have only had a few first downs until the fourth quarter the entire game. That's how good that defense was yesterday. Frostburg State at number 6 in the nation, 61. Southern Virginia 7. Connor Cox with the day with 5 touchdowns in that game. Christopher Newport 13. Kane 3. Teams combined for just 293 yards. And TCNJ 24. William Patterson 7. I thought Patterson might get this one, but they did not, as we had some good rushing by TCNJ players in that game. That's Dave Jakera and Mark Pacini rushing for 165 and 94 yards respectively, 1 touchdown each. So that's that for the NJAC. NUMAC, we're going to talk a lot more about this later. Let's just go to the scores and the highlights right now. WPI 13, MIT 6 in a very cold and rain-snow mixed game in Worcester. They now have created a real conundrum at the top of the NUMAC standings with this score. MIT only had 48 passing yards in that game, and you got to look at the performance here by Nyland, Julian Nyland and Spencer Harrington. Nyland 8 for 16, 90 yards, 1 touchdown. And Harrington kicks 41 and 31-yard field goals. There's the points right there. The touchdown and the 2 field goals.
Yeah,
13-6. Norwich 31, Catholic 0, just to finish out here, as it was Aaron Connor with 11 rushes for 107 yards, 2 touchdowns. Connor Bork for Norwich with 10 rushes, 107 yards and a touchdown. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about the NUMAC later. Let's jump over to the final conference, and that is the NESCAC. And we have Amherst 19, Tufts 13. I don't know what the hashtag crank it means, but Amherst seems to be getting some mileage off it, as it was Jack Hickey with 20 rushes for 89 yards and a touchdown. Ryan McDonald for Tufts, though, had a 17 for 34 day, 137 yards passing, 2 interceptions. That was a big game for this NESCAC, because Amherst, if they beat Trinity, wins the NESCAC outright. There's nothing anybody can do about it. They'll separate themselves by 2 games. Trinity won against Middlebury 48-0, had 516 to 73 yards offensively in that game. Williams 27, Hamilton 17, and basically Williams held Hamilton to 64 rushing yards in that game, and the defense had 4 interceptions, Puzzi with 2 of them, and Colby 21, Bates 6, Schwern with 40 rushes. That's Jake Schwern for 226 yards and 3 touchdowns. And finally, Wesleyan's Mark Piccirillo and company 24, Bowdoin 0, as Piccirillo had 158 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and an interception. But Wesleyan had a great time of possession margin at 38 plus minutes to 21 and change for Bowdoin. And as you know, folks, that was crunch time for Week 9. Well, JB, that was a lot, to say the least.
Yep.
We're going to save our discussion about the new MAC for a little bit. I want to talk first about the NJAC. And, we focused on these two conferences in the MAC the most because of the implications going on here. The NJAC is starting to simplify a little bit. Wesley kind of helped us in that, because if they had stuck around, we would have had a three-way merry-go-round thing going on. We don't have that. Right now is Wesley kind of ceding control here to Salisbury and to Frostburg State. Salisbury's strength of schedule is not the highest in the world, I'll tell you that right now. It is in the 100 in teens, I believe, and it stands to go up, obviously, with what's in front of them. Frostburg State, actually, I think they're below that. I think Brockport was the one, the 100 in teens I was looking at earlier in the day. I think they are actually in the 170s. Is that correct? Out of 240 teams, 250 teams?
That's pretty low, yeah.
But they still have to play Wesley and Frostburg State, so it's going to rocket up from there. Yep.
Yeah, well, the Salisbury is hurt by the fact that their first game is against Albright. Albright hasn't won.
Yep.
So that's going to drag it down.
It will, and the OWP only has 1/3 of an effect on it, whereas the opponent's winning percentage is 2/3 of an effect. So that's why that does draw so much on their strength of schedule. But they have some quality games under their belt compared to some other teams like Brockport, potentially, if they were to, let's say, trip up against Cortland. More on that later, too. Salisbury, in control of their own destiny. Frostburg State, in control of their own destiny right now, when you think about it. And if Jack Navitsky plays like he did in yesterday's game against Rowan, this is going to be clear sailing for them. If he can run like that against Wesley, it's going to be undefeated on Week 11, basically a de facto championship game for the NJAC in that game. First things first, Sherman Wood, their head coach, has to keep their heads in this, and he's been doing a great job. I mean, look, they only won by 2 points against Montclair. Now, in retrospect, that Montclair defense is really all that we're thinking. See what they've done. So, Sherman Wood, very much a player's coach. He's been explained to us as by multiple people, but also very stern, tough love kind of guy. I can tell you that. Enjoyed meeting him, talking with him. We had a lot of wind in the background in this interview you're going to hear and see, but it's still usable. We want to hear him in his own words about how he got this team to focus in and hunker down for this game and for what else is coming up here for his team. Let's go to the interview with Sherman Wood. Frank Rossi with head coach Sherman Wood of Salisbury University. Coach, 45-7, top to bottom, a complete effort for the team. And you hear the wind right now going on in my microphone, and cold. It is cold here, but your team had a very hot game from start to finish, something they've lacked a little bit at times this season. How did you get them motivated for this game?
Well, first of all, the first part of the motivation was the type of team we was playing. Rowan is a well-respected program, great tradition, and obviously coming off a big win over Wesley. I think that part got everyone's attention, and I think that was one of the reasons why our kids was focused all week, came out and just we executed and just wanted to make sure we did the things that we knew that we had to do. And I honestly didn't expect this type of margin, but we'll take it.
Coach, great job as you pointed out by the team, but the schedule is here. Rowan, check on that box right now. Wesley next week, the Route 13 showdown, always tough. Frostburg after that. How do you get this team to stay focused, to stay in this kind of groove right now?
Well, I think number one, we have a group of guys who are not superstars. We have people in positions right now that never really been in this situation, and all they do is work extremely hard all week. We tell them to ignore everything in terms of students and social media to make sure we continue to work extremely hard and doing practice, and good things will come. We also know that it's very difficult to defend what we do, and we know if we execute and just be a team, have a team mindset, we should be okay. So our focus right now is just the next opponent. We're not thinking who it is. We just feel the next opponent. We just continue to do what we're doing, and hopefully things will work out.
You had a little bit of a decision to make with quarterback this season with a couple of sophomores on your roster that could have stepped up for this. You end up with Jack Navitsky. He gets 103 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground today. What was it about him that you saw that made you put him into this role?
Well, he's done this before. He's done this in high school, and he was recruited for this reason. And to have him come through, I love his attitude. I love his heart. I think that's one thing that we have. He has that type of personality. He has that great personality to make sure the kids around him rallies around him, and he's athletic, So some of the things we do, he's still working on a few things, but once he understands what we're all about and what we're doing as far as our concept, he could be really dangerous. And I really believe this whole football team, the best is yet to come. I mean, we're still working hard, we're still grinding, but we still have a lot of technique work to do. But we'll take it. We're definitely playing good team football.
It's tough to believe a team could be much more dangerous than a 45-7 big win against a team like Rowan, but we'll believe you and leave it at that with you. Congratulations. Good luck in the next couple weeks. And that was my interview with head coach of Salisbury, Sherman Wood. The Seagulls under great guidance with him as head coach, to say the least. He's not a household name, really, and yet his team does nothing but win, it seems like. I kind of think he likes the fact he's not the household name in terms of coaching out there right now. He's kind of that, yes, he on the sideline, you'll know he's there. Trust me on that. But when it comes to, talking outside of that fact, his bark is probably bigger than his bite. I'm saying that only because I'm hearing that dog in the background over there, JB. So apparently the dog wanted me to say that. So, but no, Sherman Wood is kind of a guy you don't want to mess with if you're a player, that's for sure. But if you do a great job in that field, he will celebrate with you as much as anybody. I mean, look at the records of his teams. He's a 20th year head coach at Salisbury, and I mean, look, winners big time throughout his history. Sure, they've had their off seasons. Who hasn't really to a certain degree? But with that triple option offense, he liked Jack Navitsky. He explained why to us in that interview. The heart that Navitsky has, that's for sure. And you know what? Let's let Navitsky talk about some things in his own words here. Jack Navitsky, sophomore quarterback for Salisbury, talked to me after the game. Mike Rossi here with quarterback for Salisbury, Jack Navitsky, 103 yards, 3 touchdowns, and you definitely were getting your team behind you throughout this game, Jack. This team has struggled at times offensively. That Montclair game comes to mind where it's 17-15, but all the points came in the first quarter. What have you done to become more of a leader for this team like this?
Definitely starts with rallying everyone together and making sure that we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We all see the same end goal, and having a defense like we have that gives us even more motivation to know that if we don't get the job done one drive, they're going to have our backs, and we just need to go out there and focus on getting in the end zone the next one. Well,
he did a great job with it. We look at the pass game, we look at the run game for Salisbury last year. Went out on D3FB. It was more of a pass-first offense. Or not pass first, but 10 passes per game. It's been 5 passes per game. Are you in a comfort zone at all with the pass game? Is this just something they're trying to get you comfortable with, that you're not passing the ball much? Take us through kind of the way your posture towards this offense.
Passing game, if we want to be the best we can be, it needs to be there. So it's definitely still a part of our offense. I'm comfortable in it. I think Coach does a great job calling the plays when we need to. We've just been so dominant on the ground that, sometimes we just need to stay with it, and then eventually the play action will open up. And, it's still something we rep every week, every day in practice that, we're working on becoming the best we can be. Because, like I said, if we don't have that pass game, then we're not going to be the best we can be.
Well, you didn't need it today much in a 45-7 victory. You know what's next. I don't have to really tell you.
Right.
I'll say it just for posterity here. Wesley Frostburg for the NJAC title. It's going to be amazing, really, when you get down to it. Take me through, you're a sophomore. You haven't seen much of it.
Right.
Last year you watched more than played in it, obviously. Take me through what you expect to go through here in this gauntlet.
It's gonna be tough, but it's nothing we haven't prepared for. Off season. It's what we work for. We work to be 8-0 right now, but like I said, it's not what we strive to be. So we keep working each week, every day. We got to work hard. First comes Wesley. Got to take care of business there first. Tough rival opponent. So like I said, it's gonna be tough. It's going to be gritty. We got to grind it out, but that all comes during the week when, the coaches have prepared us for this, and we just got to continue to work hard. That's what Coach Wood's been preaching to us.
Now, it's interesting. You're a Jersey guy, and kind of a homecoming. Come on in. I'm going to make you do some shout-outs. I want you to be good and close for it, but you're a Jersey guy, and kind of a homecoming game here of sorts. The whole conference schedule really is kind of homecoming. Why Salisbury at the end of the day?
I just had a great relationship with Coach Fleetwood. Actually, Coach McCray, who's actually here today, he's now at Stevenson, the defensive coordinator, but I had an awesome relationship with him. I actually went somewhere first and ended up transferring here. The conversation I had with Coach Fleetwood, he said to me when I committed to the first school, he said, if it doesn't work out, just know you can always give me a call. And that stuck with me. And, I had such a good relationship with him, and it was the first person that I made the call to when I wanted to transfer. And, here I am. And it's honestly kind of fun playing those Jersey schools. My family and friends get to come out and watch. And, it's tough for these teams, rowing teams, because we got a couple other Jersey kids, when the Jersey kids are putting the beating on the Jersey schools. So it makes it a little bit fun.
Well, quite a beating, 45-7 today. Okay, for those that might not have been here, or for those that work here, it's time for your shout-outs to any family, friends, fans, anybody.
My parents are here, Scott and Jody. They're the best. Bobby from Ripped, shout out to him. He was here today. Mr. Chamberlain, love him to death. And then all my boys back home. My brother, he's down in Georgia at University of Georgia. And then my other brother, he's playing for Red Bank Regional, my alma mater. They're number 5 in the shore right now. Only got 1 loss heading into playoffs, looking for top 3 seeds. So shout out the Bucks, and that's that.
Little Friday Night Lights action on the shore there.
Yeah.
No doubt. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good luck down the line here.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
And that was Jack Navitsky, sophomore quarterback, Salisbury Seagulls. And he's got a tough task ahead of him. And he said it himself. He knows it's going to be a tough task. In the Route 13 showdown versus Wesley, and then the Frostburg game. Now, they could lose either game and still technically win this conference. If they, let's say, lost to Wesley, for instance, beating Frostburg would give them the victory. If it happened the other way around, they beat Wesley and lost Frostburg, they would have to hope that Frostburg had lost in Week 10. So, the Wesley game is relevant, though, still, no matter what, because they want to have an option for a Pool C bid. We'll explain why that matters in a moment. Let's go to the playoff races now. This is where a lot of people have been waiting for us to give a little bit of guidance as to what's going on, who needs to root for whom, and why and how. I haven't let you say much here about Salisbury itself. What are your thoughts before we do rush on to the other stuff?
Well, I think that they have been a very consistent program over the years. If you look at their track record, they're always in the 7, 8, 9 win type of conversation. They're always in the hunt for the NJAC. They're one of the best triple option teams out there, so they do what they do really well. And so, there's a good opportunity for this team, even if they do lose the head-to-head matchup with Frostburg, to get that highly coveted Pool C in out at large bid to the playoffs. It's going to be weird that Wesley probably won't make the field for the first time in a decade or 2 decades. Given Mike Drass's success, and I think this year is maybe just with a combination of injuries and just all the stuff that they've had to deal with his passing, they've come up a little bit short, but they'll be back, and the Wolverines will definitely have a say in how things turn out in the NJAC. But there's a reason why this conference is probably the strongest in the East region right now, and you're kind of seeing it all come to a head.
Right, you are, sir. Some other conferences may argue with you on that. I can't really argue against you on that at all. I think that from top to bottom, from top to bottom, these teams just look like they're out to get each other every week, more so than any other conference. The Empire 8 may have done a little carnage to itself, and I get that it's a strong conference, but at the end of the day, look. We'll talk about Brockport and their issues in a second. Let's first go and look at the New England conferences. I think that might be the best way to go with this, and get them all up here because I want to go one foul swoop, hurry this up so you can grab dinner with your lovely wife Jen, who I love dearly, and I don't want to hold her up here on this Sunday evening. Western New England and Endicott. Now, granted, this may not do it in terms of the following. West New England and Endicott both are 4-0. West New England obviously plays Endicott on Week 10. Week 11 is Endicott Salve Regina, though. So here's what happens. If West New England wins, conference over because they've beaten both teams at one loss. If Endicott wins, there is still the possibility that Salve Regina could beat them and force a three-way tie. And if that happens, we'd have to go get our CCC tiebreaker manuals, and we will do so. We'll find out what the tiebreaker is and do all that math. But it would create a merry-go-round type of situation, which we all know and love. So, again, Western New England wins, done. We have a champion in Week 10. We try to bring that game in our D3 Blitzer show, as you know, folks, next week. And we'll be pushing out more information throughout the week about it. So look for that on our Facebook and Twitter feeds. Endicott wins. They're in the catbird seat, but they have not won it quite at that point. Easy?
Not exactly.
I strive to be somewhat not easy, I guess, in these situations. But
makes things more interesting.
Yes, exactly. Husson in the ECFC at 5-0. SUNY Maritime and Gallaudet both with one loss. Husson plays Gallaudet. Now, if Husson beats Gallaudet, they've beaten the one team remaining that has one loss. That's SUNY Maritime. If Gallaudet beats Husson, Husson does not play another conference game after this game. They are done with their conference schedule as they play. Is it Plymouth State? I think in Week 11.
That's right.
So they will be 5-1 at that point in time. Gallaudet would be, they would be 5-1. Gallaudet would be 4-1, and SUNY Maritime plays Hampton, so they're going to stay at 4-1 also. And then the Week 11 game is, Gallaudet hosting SUNY Maritime, and that would mean essentially Husson would have to watch that game if Gallaudet were able to beat them in Week 10. Another game that's going to be in our complement of games for the Blitzer as long as rights are granted to us, and we have no reason to think they won't be. But the point being this, Husson wins, it's over. Husson loses, we keep going to Week 11 and see what happens there. How the heck did SUNY Maritime Hampton get on the schedule as a game? That's one I'm scratching my head at.
Yeah, no idea there. That's interesting.
MASCAC time. Western Connecticut 6-0, Framingham State 5-1. Western Connecticut beats Framingham State at 5 o'clock on Saturday outside our window, don't forget. Then Western Connecticut is the champion of the MASCAC. If Framingham State beats Western Connecticut, then essentially we're going to go to Week 11 with Framingham State controlling its own destiny at that point, and for that matter, Western Connecticut's destiny, as they would have to still win that game in Week 11 against that is Worcester State at noontime at Worcester State in Week 11. So, again, Western Connecticut wins, done. Framingham State wins, go to Week 11 in the Worcester State game. Stop me if any of this is confusing. You're not stopping me, so I'm going. Because here's where it gets confusing.
Okay, yeah, this is the tricky part.
NUMAC. 4-1 MIT, 4-1 Merchant Marine, 4-1 Springfield. Thomas More, not pictured. They should be pictured, however. That's the problem. They are currently 6-2. They face a Division II team named Lake Erie. Now, this game matters for Thomas More next week because that is a not great Division II team. The committee will know that fact. So if they were to drop that game, Thomas More would effectively be able to only finish 7-3 or 6-4, depending on how things go against St. John's in Week 11, which is a top 5 nationally ranked team, don't forget.
Yeah.
I would say that Thomas More must win both remaining games really to be relevant, but they could still finish 7-3 if they were able to beat Lake Erie and lose to St. John's to still be considered against one loss MIT or one loss Merchant Marine or one, it would be 2 loss Springfield no matter what here. The problem really is, I think, MIT and their strength of schedule because Merchant Marine's strength of schedule, thanks to Misericordia, is pretty good. I think one loss Merchant Marine team against a 3-loss Thomas More team, the committee could justify Merchant Marine as the Pool B selection. I think MIT makes it a little more vexing at the end of the day. MIT, though, would have to beat Springfield in Week 11, don't forget. And don't forget, MIT still has a little bit of a challenge across its schedule. It's got Norwich next week, which is not a horrible team in the new MAC.
No.
That game could go Norwich's way at Norwich. We'll see how the weather plays out, too, for that matter.
It's going to be cold, yeah.
But here's the key. We got to see who's left at one loss. If all the teams are 2 losses in the new MAC or worse, ultimately, then I got to say, based on strength of schedule, a 7-3 Thomas More team may very well get the bid over an 8-2 or 7-2 new MAC team. If it's 7-3 Thomas More versus blank and 1 new MAC team, there's an argument to be made. They'll have to discuss it at the committee level, but I just don't know which way it goes in that case, especially if it's not Merchant Marine in that position. We're going to have to walk through it more when we get those regional rankings to see what level of respect Thomas More is getting in their region, which is the South region. Normally less teams, so it may be slightly higher than you might expect them to be there compared to, let's say, the East region rankings if they were actually placed in the East. But the point is, again, we don't know. Don't count Thomas More out. The new MAC could go 0 for bids because of this whole Pool B situation until they get their own automatic bid next year. You've been watching this a little bit. I mean, make your best argument, I guess, against putting Thomas More in.
That would be a tough argument. I guess it would depend. I mean, if they got destroyed by St. John's, and maybe that would point to the fact that that they would probably be a one and done type of playoff team. It may also depend upon who's in the rest of the pool and the fact that they're in Kentucky / Cincinnati. Maybe that could be a beneficial pairing versus. Or maybe not as beneficial as a New England team, since we have Husson up in the far reaches of Maine, and so there's a lot of different factors that are involved here, Frank. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to boil down to numbers, and it's going to depend on how their schedule, and they're going to be playing they're going to probably have a very high strength of schedule, and that's definitely looked on very favorably by the committee. So barring, I think that scenario you said, if it's an X and 1 new MAC team, that there's probably a good chance that the Saints could leapfrog them.
While you were talking, we just got a tweet literally on Sunday evening here from our next conference, the NESCAC, specifically in Amherst. We asked if there was some relevance to the hashtag, and you can see right here that it basically says, Coach Mills has used it for years. Crank it refers to the attitude we ask our players to have at all times, whether it's on the field, in the classroom, or in life. It's the ability to rise up and meet any task with enthusiasm and 100% effort, no matter the circumstance. Oh, fair enough. That one of the best explanations I've ever heard for a hashtag in my life. Look, Amherst does it the Amherst way. Always. That's one of the things you will never ever forget about them. So thank you to them for that, by the way. Speaking of thanking them for doing that, it allows me to segue to say, hey, Amherst, you're in control of your own destiny here. If you beat Trinity, you win the conference outright. If you lose to Trinity, then it comes down to the biggest little game in the country. That's the Amherst-Williams game in Week 11. That's pretty simple. For the NESCAC. Win and done for Amherst, and then they can enjoy the game against Williams a little bit more because the conference race is not on the top of the agenda. Granted, they want to finish undefeated using that game.
Sure.
But Brockport Cortland. Here's another case of, boy, does your strength of schedule do you in, possibly. Cortland could very well beat Brockport if Brockport doesn't stop doing this whole dropping the ball, inside the red zone thing that they've been doing. And that's not necessarily interceptions or fumbles, but just not converting. This has been twice now. And my point to Brockport folks that want to blame injuries is the following. You're a team that wants to be at worst a national semifinalist again. Teams that are national semifinalist teams do not blame injuries because of their depth, ultimately. Okay? Mary Hardin Baylor, I hate to say it this way, but if their top 2 receivers went down, guess what? they have Aaron Sims waiting and somebody else, right to the top of the depth chart to that point, and they will pick up where those two left off. Mount Union, if D'Angelo Fulford went down as quarterback, there's somebody else waiting in the wings ready to go and will probably do 6 or 7 touchdowns themselves against a team like they did yesterday.
Yep.
Brockport, depth is what you need to have that run. Yeah. You saw it yourself. You were wondering why the Mary Hardin Baylors out there were who they were. You saw it in Belton, Texas. You need to win and win big, repeatedly. Your defense did a great job, minus 62 rushing yards. Great. Jake O'Connell is missing at least for a week, it sounds like, with an injury. I get it.
Next man up.
You know what?
Yeah.
The next man up. And next man up, and next man up. Tyree Brown, Joe Benedict, all you guys who are the next men up have to show that you have depth in that team. I don't care the elements were what they were, because Salisbury scored 45 in those elements. RPI scored in the 40s in those elements. We saw Western New England score in the 40s in those elements. Teams did what they were supposed to do despite the elements. No excuses, guys. You want to be a semifinalist again, you're going to have to win a lot better than that. And Cortland's next up, and they are not a bad team. They went to number 20, I believe it was, on my ballot this week, because they have quietly returned to a position of resurgence here, and that's what's up next here. Brockport, Cortland. It's the championship game. If Brockport loses, you know what? They may not make the playoffs. They might not.
They may not, yeah.
Because Salisbury or Frostburg will probably be ahead of them at that point as the Pool C First East team. The loser of Frostburg Salisbury, assuming Salisbury beats Wesley.
Yeah, because of the schedules. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's really what you got to do. Win it yourself. You cannot depend on the committee to put you in. Flat out. Do not put it in somebody else's hands. I saw a tweet that said that they take care of their own business at the end of the day. Well, you're going to have to do it. There you go.
Yep.
Game on. Brockport, Cortland, 2 o'clock, part of our Blitzer package on Saturday, at least the first half of it, because it does start later than most games that we'll be covering. And we'll see how that game is going and determine whether to continue carrying it or to send you off on your way to watch the end of it on your own. That's the Empire 8 for you.
Yep.
Am I wrong?
Nope. No, I think you summed it up pretty well. I mean, at the end of the day, there are certain – you sort of expect a certain level of performance from teams that are in the top 5, and we didn't see that from Brockport, whether or not. Because at this time of year in Minnesota and Wisconsin, it's colder and the weather is worse than it is in upstate New York. So you can't really make an excuse that it was a weather thing or whatever. And yeah, I mean, at this level of football, there's no excuses, period. So yeah, I think if they're gonna have a bad game, that's fine. Maybe it's a little the kick in the that they need to kind of get refocused for a really strong Cortland team that didn't even, their quarterback, Segala, didn't really even do his thing. Normally he's passing for 300, 400 yards a game, but because of the weather conditions, they went with the running game. Atkins, they have a 1-2 punch there, kind of just like they do at Brockport. So it should be a great, teams with great offenses playing with teams with strong defenses. I think the one area that Brockport has a clear edge is that their defense is one of the best nationally. It just depends on, can their offense. Sometimes it does have some hiccups here and there, but they're going to need to put up points. I think they'll have a slight advantage over the Cortland defense. I don't think they're as strong as the Cortland offense, but we'll see.
Yeah, and one other thing I want to say too, though, with all these stats, over 500 yards of offense yesterday, minus 62 rushing yards, only less than 200 yards given up on offense in that game. Unfortunately, the committee doesn't look at that. The committee looks at the result. If it ever came down to a Pool C situation, it's results versus certain teams. And the result means 22-6 is the result they'll see against Utica. And if that's a mutual matchup with somebody else, it probably won't be under who they'd be tied with or be looked at with for Pool C. Still, it's the result. You could have minus 900 yards. If it's still looking like 10-5 or 10-6 on the scoreboard for some reason, that's the result that the NCAA is going to see. They don't look much further than that. They know you're a good team defensively, okay? They know it, the committee. But that's not what is in their charge. Their charge says you look at the results, you look at their record, you look at the strength of schedule, you look at the record versus regionally ranked opponents. That's it, okay? Yep. So I'm not trying to be a hard you-know-what on them, but at the same time, there's a reality here. We hear all these stats thrown out about them and everything else. Cortland, you want to go to the playoffs? Here it is. Here's your chance. But you know what you're up against. And a team that probably will wake up for the next game and put in the ball to the end zone multiple times. Liberty League talking about a team putting ball in the end zone multiple times. RPI did that on Saturday against Rochester. Comes down to them versus St. Lawrence because RPI's beat both Ithaca and Hobart, the one-loss teams there. St. Lawrence is able to beat RPI. We got a mess going on at one loss possibly, although Ithaca and Hobart play each other on Week 10 as well. So we'll watch that game as well just in case. But St. Lawrence, if you can't do it, RPI wins the conference. There it is. So, pretty easy there again. Talk about that. Let's look at the MAC next. Del Val, Misericordia, and Stevenson are the only three teams really alive here, I would say. Del Val 6-0, Misericordia 6-0, Stevenson 5-1. It would take a real tumultuous situation to get Stevenson back into this equation, but it's not impossible. Del Val would have to lose to Widener. And I believe what ends up happening is in a three-way tie when Misericordia hasn't played Stevenson, the tiebreaker does not include the Del Val-Stevenson game head-to-head situation. Yeah. So we would go to the next valid tiebreaker that includes all the three teams. So we'd have to look a lot deeper into that. We'll see what happens in Week 10. If it's relevant, we'll talk to you about it during the Blitzer show a little bit more. But Del Val, first things first. All right, Misericordia, first things first, has Albright, a team that is winless currently, but keeps trying to do something to change that. Del Val at Kings.
Not push either. Yeah, I mean, then they've been a pretty tough team here and there. But then it's interesting that Misericordia has to play Lyco in Week 11, and they're kind of in the middle of the conference there. They could cause an upset at any time.
True. And don't forget that Stevenson has FDU Florham in Week 11 and Widener and Del Val at 1:07 p.m. on Week 11. Finally, the NJAC, and again, this one's boiling down to a two-team race. Yeah. It's also a Pool C race that the country is going to watch. Pool C is going to be most affected by Salisbury-Wesley, because if Wesley were to beat Salisbury and Frostburg were able to beat Salisbury in Week 11, it will open up a Pool C bid most likely for somebody nationally. Yep. If Salisbury wins it, then I got to say, my true belief with the strength of the NJAC overall is that the loser of that game deserves a bid no matter what in Week 11, Frostburg-Salisbury game. So Wesley-Salisbury is at noontime on Week 10. In Week 11, Salisbury at Frostburg State. The Regents Cup game is at 1 o'clock. It's going to come down to that game basically no matter what, because like I said earlier, if Salisbury were to lose to Wesley, it's still the champion of that Week 11 game wins the conference, unless Frostburg State were to drop a game against Kane. Not happening. With all due respect to Kane, not happening.
Yeah, not this year. No.
So, JB, there we go again with our playoff rundown. A lot of teams in control of their own destiny. The MAC may be the only real exception in the new MAC in terms of who we can boil down, one or two teams controlling their destiny. We can't really boil down the new MAC. We can't boil down, certain situations where lots of different variables come into play. MAC is that as much as anything because they don't play a full round robin anymore. So that's where we go with that. I want to address one last thing before I let our fans go, or viewers go, or whatever you may be, our haters go.
Exactly.
The new top 25 poll has not been released as of the recording of this, but a lot of people somehow spotted the fact that there was a missing number one vote for Mary Hardin Baylor the previous week. And I stepped up and said I was the guy who changed my vote back to Mount Union. The reason was the inconsistency at quarterback play, the inconsistency of management of quarterbacks by Mary Hardin Baylor. The quarterback position was the big difference maker in the Stag Bowl last year against Mount Union. Yeah. And because of that, if that situation hasn't really changed, Mount Union's still a better team. Look, Fulford threw 7 touchdowns yesterday for Mount Union. So, looking, though, at what happened yesterday, Luke Poorman had a great job done as starter, first time he got to start, in their homecoming game against McMurray by UMHB. And hopefully they figure out whether he's the answer or Jace Hammock is the answer. I think those are the only two legitimate answers here at the end of the day in terms of starters. The RPO run pass option is going to be better for one of those two guys. Whoever it is, they will figure it out. But until we see consistency for a couple of weeks at least, I'm keeping my vote where it was last week. So I kept it at Mount Union, but I'm still eyes wide open right now. I could very easily next week, if things kind of flipped around, or stay flipped around rather, and they had a great QBing performance again against inferior competition, I could put it back again to Mary Hardin Baylor. But, I didn't mean to cause controversy. I did want to signal in some format, I guess, the question I had as to what's happening there, because I've watched Mary Hardin Baylor play Mount Union at field level. I know what the difference was there, and if that difference hasn't changed, then to me, I have to pick Mount Union as the better team. What's your view? Who's number one right now in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I think, definitely the Raiders as the defending champs, the way that they've been performing, the way they took care of, teams like John Carroll, which was a pretty exciting battle. I think that, John Carroll could be in the mix for one of those Pool C bids and do pretty well in the playoffs. So I think I'm with you on this one right now, Frank. It's definitely looks like Mount Union is the number one team in the country until someone, knocks them off either in the regular season or the playoffs.
Well, sir, I think that's about it. I'm just noticing we didn't call playoffs on the bottom of the screen, call playoff the entire time. We're going to leave it like that because it's a lot easier to do. But we will have some great guests. I believe Al Coleman is going to be our player guest this week from Western New England, the quarterback there. Jason LeBeau had joined Pat Coleman on the Around the Nation podcast that I accidentally had to co-host with him on Friday. But Jason LeBeau, the coach, Al Coleman, though, is really the story to me, replacing Anthony Service. And both his feet and his arm are doing a tremendous job. And we'll talk more about that when we talk with him. And also Coach Guest will be coming up this week, too. So stay tuned. And in the huddle, it gets exciting here with the D3 Blitzer show that we do coming up on Saturday, and the regional rankings show we're going to do on Wednesday after the regional rankings are released. Stay tuned to us all week long, folks. We got a lot of content to come up.